Welcome, dear listener. Make yourself comfortable, let your body rest, and allow your thoughts to quiet. Tonight, we begin the second part of our journey through Greek mythology. In the first tale, we saw the cosmos take its first breath. Chaos gave way to Gaia and Uranos. Titans were born, revolted and fell. Kronos swallowed his own children to prevent prophecy, but Zeus escaped, rose in secret, and led his siblings in a war that shook the very bones of the earth. The Titanomachy ended with thunder, chains, and silence. Now that war is over. The Titans groan in the depths of Tartarus, bound by the 100-handed ones. The earth no longer trembles with rebellion. The air no longer cracks with battle. A new age begins, the age of the Olympians. At its center stands Zeus. Zeus took his place upon Mount Olympus, the high throne where clouds gather and storms are born. To the Greeks, Olympus was not only a mountain, it was a living symbol of the distance between gods and mortals. On its snowy peak the air is thin, the ground too cold for farmers, the summit too high for shepherds. Few men ever climbed so far. Olympus was remote, and therefore holy, untouched by ordinary life. To place Zeus there was to declare that kingship itself stood above the reach of human hands. From his throne, Zeus gazed upon the whole of the world, the restless seas, the fertile earth, the shadowed underworld. His brothers and sisters, once swallowed by Kronos, now stood free around him. Each held their place, each embodying a domain of life. Poseidon, lord of the sea, stood tall with his three-pronged trident. To the Greeks, the sea was both a highway and a threat, rich with fish, yet filled with storms. Poseidon reflected that duality. He was not only the god of calm waves, but also the shaker of the earth itself. Earthquakes were called the rage of Poseidon, and his moods were as unpredictable as the waters he ruled. To live on the coast of Greece was to know Poseidon as both giver and destroyer. Hades, quiet and stern, claimed the underworld. He did not rule the dead as a tyrant, but as a custodian. His helm of invisibility made him unseen, and that was fitting. The Greeks imagined death itself as invisible, inevitable, always near, yet never in plain sight. Unlike later portrayals, Hades was not evil. He was order in the face of mortality, the one who ensured every soul found its place. To honor Hades was to acknowledge that death, though feared, was also part of the structure of life. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, held the power of fertility and famine in her hands. She was the one who taught mortals to till fields, plant seeds, and reap their food. Without her, hunger ruled. With her, abundance flowed. Every ear of grain, every ripe olive, every fig on a tree was thought to carry her blessing. The cycle of life and death, of sowing and reaping, lived in her domain. Hera, Queen of Heaven, stood beside Zeus as his consort. To her was given the realm of marriage and family, the bond that joined mortals and gods alike. Yet Hera was not gentle in her guardianship. She punished betrayal fiercely and without mercy, especially Zeus's many infidelities. Her jealousy was not smallness, but vigilance, the reminder that every promise has weight and every broken vow leaves a wound. Hestia, the quietest of them all, tended the hearth. She had no temples filled with statues, no battles fought in her name. Yet every fire that burned in every home, every warmth that kept families alive through the cold, was hers. She was the center, the stillness, the flame that made a house into a dwelling. To forget Hestia was to forget the heart of life itself. Together, this family formed the first circle of the Olympian order. They were not just rulers. They were reflections of the forces that made the world livable: sea, death, food, marriage, hearth, and sky. To the Greeks, these were not abstractions. They were daily realities. Every meal, every voyage, every funeral, every marriage was a moment of contact with the gods. At the center of it all was Zeus. His weapon was the thunderbolt, forged by the Cyclopes, flashing with the fire of storm. But lightning was more than a weapon, it was a sign. When thunder rolled across the mountains, the Greeks did not hear chants. They heard judgment. A king might lie, a priest might deceive, but lightning was incorruptible. It struck without argument, without bribe, without delay. To live under Zeus was to live under the awareness that justice could fall at any time, from any sky. Zeus was also the upholder of Xenia, the sacred law of hospitality. To the Greeks, every stranger could be a god in disguise. To welcome them with bread, salt, and water was to honor Zeus himself. To betray or abuse a guest was to invite his wrath. This was no small matter in a world where cities depended on alliances and travelers depended on strangers for survival. By placing Zeus at the heart of hospitality, the Greeks sanctified trust between human beings. And yet, Zeus himself was not above contradiction. Though he upheld law, he also broke it. Though he was the protector of marriage, he was infamous for his passions. His liaisons with mortals and goddesses alike filled the myths with children, heroes who would rise, suffer, and fall. Zeus was not perfect. He was not meant to be. For the Greeks, perfection was not the nature of gods. Power was. And power always carried desire, weakness, and flaw. Even Zeus, king of gods, was not free of limit. Over him stood the Moirai, the Fates, who spun, measured, and cut the thread of every life. Not even thunder could silence them. Even Zeus, who once overthrew Kronos, lived under prophecy, under the shadow of a son who might one day overthrow him. The cycle was not broken. It never broke. It only continued, reshaped in each generation. And so the throne of Zeus was both radiant and trembling. It embodied the paradox of Greek mythology, that order is never final, that greatness always stands beside weakness, that even the most powerful are bound by something greater than themselves. The Greeks told these stories not simply to praise Zeus, but to remind themselves of the nature of life. Every family has conflict, every ruler faces fear, every promise carries the risk of betrayal. To live was to exist within cycles of creation and destruction, justice and desire, love and jealousy. The gods were not outside of these truths. They were the truths, made flesh, crowned with power, and written into story. From the throne of Olympus, Zeus looked down upon the world, and the world looked up to him. Temples rose, sacrifices burned, oaths were sworn. But behind the thunder and glory, the same truth lingered. No throne is unshakable, no reign eternal. Even for the gods, time waits with open jaws, and so begins the age of the Olympians. From this high seat, new tales unfold, of Hera's relentless watch, of Poseidon's storms, of Hades' solemn realm, of Demeter's grief and renewal, of Hestia's quiet flame. The Titanomachy was only the first war. The true drama now begins. If Zeus was the thunder that crowned Olympus, Hera was the weight that gave the throne its dignity. To the Greeks, no ruler could stand alone. A king without a queen was incomplete, lacking the balance of order and legitimacy. Hera was that balance. She was the queen of heaven, goddess of marriage, protector of families, and the stern guardian of vows. Yet Hera was far more than a wife seated beside her husband. She was a force in her own right, a presence as ancient and powerful as Zeus himself. Some stories even suggest that before Zeus rose to power, Hera was worshipped independently, a goddess of fertility and sovereignty. To the Greeks, she was not merely the shadow of Zeus's reign, she was the other half of the sky, radiant, terrible, and necessary. Marriage was her domain, not the soft romantic union of lovers, but the binding contract that joined families, cities, and generations. In a world where survival depended on strong bonds, Hera embodied the sacredness of fidelity. To honor her was to honor stability itself. A marriage blessed by Hera was meant to endure. A vow broken under her gaze was more than betrayal. It was sacrilege. This guardianship gave Hera both her greatness and her fury. For though she was the protector of vows, her own marriage to Zeus was marked by constant betrayal. The Thunderer's passions were restless, his heart easily drawn to mortal women and immortal goddesses alike. Each new affair wounded Hera, not only as a wife, but as the very embodiment of marriage itself. Her rage, therefore, was not petty jealousy. It was divine outrage at promises broken, at sacred laws cast aside. The myths are filled with Hera's vengeance. She pursued Zeus's lovers, yes, but more often she punished the children born of his desires. Heracles, the great hero, suffered endless trials at her command. His very name, the glory of Hera. A bitter irony, for she hounded him from birth. Io, a priestess loved by Zeus, was transformed into a cow and tormented with a stinging gadfly that drove her across the world. Semele, mother of Dionysus, was tricked into demanding Zeus reveal himself in full glory, a sight that burned her to ash. Hera's punishments were relentless, her wrath creative, her memory long. Yet to dismiss Hera as cruel would be to misunderstand her. She was not vengeance for its own sake. She was the consequence of broken order. Each betrayal of Zeus was a crack in the foundation of law, and Hera became the force that demanded repayment. In this way she was like the Erinyes, the Furies born of blood, but narrower in focus. Hera's fury lived not in the soil, but in the household. Where vows were made and broken, she was present both as blessing and as curse. Hera's power was not only destructive, she presided over the sanctity of childbirth and the growth of families. Women prayed to her for safe deliveries, for healthy children, for unions that would endure. In temples across Greece, especially in Argos and Samos, she was honored as Hera Teleia, Hera the completer, she who brings marriages to fulfillment. Pilgrims brought offerings not of conquest, but of continuity, garlands, sacrifices, and prayers for love that would hold steady through the storms of time. The Greeks saw in Hera the paradox that they saw in life itself, that love and conflict, devotion and jealousy are inseparable. To speak of marriage without struggle was to lie, and Hera refused to lie. Her myths are not tender tales of affection, but stern reminders that every promise carries a cost, that intimacy and betrayal are never far apart. Even her relationship with Zeus reflected this truth. Though their union was marred by conflict, Hera never abandoned her place. She remained queen, eternal and immovable, even when her husband strayed. Her presence upon Olympus was a reminder that kingship is not only lightning and law, but also endurance. Zeus might conquer, but Hera endured, and endurance in its own way is more powerful than conquest. In art, Hera was often depicted with the peacock, its feathers shimmering with many eyes. To the Greeks, those eyes symbolized her watchfulness, her vigilance over oaths and promises. Nothing escaped her gaze. To live under Hera's domain was to live in the knowledge that your actions, especially in love and loyalty, were always seen. Philosophically, Hera represents the eternal struggle between ideal and reality. The ideal of marriage, of faithfulness, of enduring unity, and the reality of human weakness, desire, and betrayal. The Greeks did not hide from this tension. They embodied it in Hera, allowing her both majesty and fury, both blessing and curse. In her contradictions, they saw their own. For us, listening now, Hera's myths ask a question that feels as sharp today as it did in antiquity. How do we honor promises in a world where hearts wander? How do we uphold loyalty when temptation, weakness, and desire press against it? Hera does not offer easy answers. She offers the truth that love is sacred but fragile, that trust is divine but easily broken, that to live in relationship is to live in the shadow of both devotion and betrayal. So Hera sat upon Olympus, queen beside the king, watching the world with eyes as many as the stars. She was worshipped in temples, feared in homes, invoked in vows. She was majesty and jealousy, blessing and wrath, the goddess of marriage and the mirror of its struggles. If Zeus embodied the thunder of kingship, Hera embodied the endurance of promises. Together they ruled heaven, not in peace but in tension, the same tension that rules every human bond. And so, as we leave Hera upon her throne, we see not only the queen of Olympus, but also the reflection of ourselves. For every vow we make, every promise we hold, every betrayal we endure, lives in her shadow. Hera is not just myth. She is the reminder that love is divine, not because it is perfect, but because it survives imperfection. Beneath the bright throne of Olympus, another throne stirred, restless as waves upon stone. If Zeus ruled the sky, then Poseidon ruled the deep. The Greeks called him Enosigaios, the earth-shaker, and Hippios, master of horses. His realm was vast, his moods as shifting as the sea itself. To understand Poseidon is to understand both the promise and the peril of the waters that surrounded Greece on every side. For the Greeks, the sea was not distant but ever present. Their lands were rocky, their soil thin, their mountains steep. To travel far or to trade with neighbors, they needed ships. The sea was a highway to the world, but it was also a danger, filled with storms that could rise without warning. Waves that could swallow ships whole, and depths that no man could measure. The ocean was opportunity and threat, life and death, freedom and fear. It was natural that such a force would be personified in a god as powerful and unpredictable as Poseidon. Poseidon's weapon was the trident, a spear with 3 sharp prongs. With it, he could stir the waters into storm, split cliffs with earthquakes, or calm the waves into stillness. To mortals, his trident was not only a weapon, but a symbol of control over chaos, the idea that the sea, wild and untamed, could bend to the will of a god. Yet Poseidon's control was never gentle. He was not a god of harmony, but of force, of sudden shifts, of the terrifying reminder that the sea belongs to itself. The myths of Poseidon often reflect this dual nature. In some tales, he is the giver of gifts. He created the first horse, striking the earth with his trident so that the animals sprang forth strong and swift. Horses, like the sea, embodied both power and danger, creatures that could serve men in battle and in labor, yet could never be fully tamed. Poseidon's horses were said to race across the waves themselves, pulling his chariot over the surface of the sea. When storms boiled on the horizon, sailors imagined his steeds galloping across the foam. But Poseidon was also a god of wrath. When angered, he unleashed earthquakes that shattered cities, tsunamis that swallowed coasts, storms that tore fleets to pieces. His vengeance was legendary. When the Trojans defied him, he shook their walls. When Odysseus blinded his son, the Cyclops Polyphemus, Poseidon pursued the wandering hero with storm after storm, keeping him from home for 10 long years. To anger Poseidon was to invite disaster, not only upon oneself, but upon one's entire city. Unlike Hades, who remained apart in his silent underworld, Poseidon was deeply entangled in the affairs of mortals. He quarreled with heroes, loved mortal women, fathered children who became kings, monsters, and champions alike. His presence was everywhere, in harbors where sailors prayed for calm seas, in temples along the coast where fishermen left offerings, in the ground that trembled beneath earthquakes. For the Greeks, Poseidon was not distant but immediate, his power felt in every tremor of earth and every surge of tide. One of Poseidon's most famous myths tells of his rivalry with Athena for the city of Athens. Both sought to become the city's patron deity. To prove their worth, each offered a gift. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident, and from the rock sprang a saltwater spring, or in some versions the first horse. Athena, by contrast, planted the olive tree, symbol of peace and prosperity. The people of Athens chose Athena's gift, and the city took her name. Poseidon, angered, did not forget the slight. and Athens often felt his hostility in storms and quakes. Yet the story reflects something deeper. Poseidon was force, Athena was wisdom, and the Greeks, for their city, chose wisdom. In his loves and passions, Poseidon was much like his brother Zeus, driven by desire, often heedless of consequence. He pursued both goddesses and mortals, leaving behind children who carried his tempestuous nature. Some were noble, others monstrous. Triton, the merman who blew his conch to calm or rouse the seas, Polyphemus, the Cyclops who devoured Odysseus's men, and numerous kings and warriors who traced their lineage to the sea god. His offspring, like the waters he ruled, reflected both life and chaos. Philosophically, Poseidon embodied the unpredictability of nature. Where Zeus represented order and law, Poseidon reminded mortals that no law could control the sea or the earth beneath their feet. He was the raw force that defied prediction, the reminder that life could change in an instant. A storm could wreck a fleet, an earthquake could swallow a city, and no human wisdom could prevent it. In Poseidon, the Greeks saw the truth that survival is never guaranteed, that every voyage, every harvest, every day depends on powers beyond human control. Yet Poseidon was not purely destructive. Sailors prayed to him for calm seas, and when he was honored, he could be generous. Fishermen thanked him for their catch, farmers for the springs that fed their fields. His trident could stir destruction, but it could also bless the land with water. The Greeks understood that gods were never simple, never wholly good or wholly evil. Poseidon was fearsome, yes, but he was also necessary. Without the sea, Greece could not trade, could not explore, could not live. In temples dedicated to Poseidon, such as the great sanctuary at Sunion, perched on a cliff above the Aegean, worshippers brought offerings not only of gratitude, but also of fear. To worship Poseidon was to acknowledge dependence on forces beyond control. His priests did not promise safety, only the hope of mercy. His power reminded mortals that humility before the sea was wisdom, that arrogance before it was folly. For us, listening now, Poseidon's myths carry the same lesson. We too live with forces beyond our control, storms of circumstance, quakes of fate, waves of uncertainty. Like the Greeks, we may imagine that we are masters of our journeys, yet a single change in weather, a single tremor in the ground, reminds us of our fragility. Poseidon lives not only in the ocean, but in every sudden upheaval of our lives, every unexpected turn that shakes us. And so Poseidon rides his chariot across the waves, horses foaming, trident flashing, his eyes as deep as the sea itself. He is both the gift of water and the terror of the storm, both the highway of trade and the destroyer of fleets, both giver and taker. He is the sea, and the sea is him, endless, restless, eternal. If Zeus ruled the sky and Poseidon the sea, then Hades held dominion over the place none wished to see, yet all would one day enter. His realm was not on Olympus, not upon the earth, not within the restless ocean. It lay beneath, hidden in shadow, sealed by rock and silence. The Greeks called it simply Haidu, the place of Hades. It was not merely a kingdom, it was inevitability itself. Hades was unlike his brothers. Zeus hurled thunder and Poseidon shook the earth, but Hades moved quietly, without spectacle. His weapon was not noise, but certainty. He was not the god of death, that was Thanatos, a separate figure, but the god of the dead. His task was not to kill, but to rule over those who had already crossed the boundary. In this sense, he was a custodian rather than a destroyer, a king who kept order where none could escape. The underworld itself was vast, layered, and strange. Its entrance was said to lie at the edges of the world, at caves, at chasms, at rivers that vanished into the earth. Travelers spoke of places like Taenarum in the Peloponnese or Lake Avernus in Italy as gates to Hades. To descend there was to cross into silence. The souls of the dead began their journey at the river Styx, whose dark waters were sacred even to the gods. Every oath sworn by the gods was sworn by Styx, for her waters were binding even upon immortals. Alongside Styx flowed other rivers: Acheron, the river of woe; Cocytus, the river of lamentation; Phlegethon, the river of fire; and Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, whose waters erased memory. Each river was more than a stream. They were metaphors made flesh, the emotions of death turned into landscapes. At the threshold stood Charon, the ferryman. For a small coin placed in the mouth of the dead, he rowed souls across the river. Those without payment were said to wander the shore for 100 years, restless and lost. The Greeks buried their dead with coins not from superstition, but from conviction. The journey into death required toll, and neglecting it was neglecting the soul. Beyond the rivers, the underworld unfolded. It was not a single place, but a collection of regions. The majority of souls dwelled in the asphodel meadows, a vast plain where they lived in shadowy forms, neither punished nor rewarded, simply existing in a pale reflection of life. For most, death was not torment, but monotony. For the virtuous and heroic, there was Elysium, a blessed realm of peace and joy. Here, fields bloomed eternally, music drifted on the air, and the greatest of heroes dwelled. Some tales even spoke of the Isles of the Blessed, where the noblest souls lived, reborn lives free from toil. To Greeks who believed in cycles of reincarnation, Elysium could be reached not once, but thrice, reserved for those who achieved virtue across lifetimes. For the wicked, there was Tartarus, not only a prison for the Titans, but also a place of punishment. Here Sisyphus endlessly rolled his stone, Ixion spun upon his fiery wheel, and Tantalus reached for water and fruit forever out of grasp. These images were not merely punishments, they were allegories of human folly, ambition, greed, betrayal, made eternal. Tartarus was not about pain alone, it was about futility, the mirror of wasted lives. At the center of this realm stood Hades himself, seated upon a throne of obsidian, his dark helm at his side. He was not cruel, but he was stern. He did not seek worship from mortals. Indeed, few dared to pray to him by name. Offerings were given to him quietly, through euphemisms such as Pluton, the wealth giver, for all riches of the earth, whether grain or gold, eventually came from beneath the soil. In this title lay a truth. Hades was not only the end of life, but also the source of renewal. The ground swallows the dead, but it also feeds the living. Beside Hades sat his queen, Persephone. Her story would later become one of the most important myths of all, shaping the Greek understanding of seasons, life, and death. For now, she stood as a reminder that even in the underworld, love and companionship had a place. Her presence softened the image of Hades, giving balance to his rule. Hades was feared, yes, but he was also respected. Unlike Zeus, who could be bribed with sacrifices, or Poseidon, who could be appeased with offerings, Hades was implacable. No prayer could reverse death. No sacrifice could bribe him into returning a soul. His justice was absolute, unyielding, beyond negotiation. In this, he embodied a truth deeper than thunder or storm, the truth of mortality. Philosophically, Hades represents what the Greeks accepted more clearly than we often do, that life is defined by its ending. Without death, life would have no urgency, no measure, no meaning. Hades is not cruelty, he is limit, and limit is what gives weight to our choices. To live under the gaze of Hades is to remember that time is not infinite, that every act matters because it cannot be undone. For us, listening now, Hades is not merely a mythic king. He is the reality we carry silently in every breath. He is the reminder that beneath all our ambitions, beneath all our striving, there waits an ending. And yet, from that ending comes renewal. The soil that swallows us will one day nourish roots, and those roots will become grain, and that grain will become life again. Hades holds not only death, but the cycle that makes life possible. And so Hades sits in his shadowed hall, helm at his side, Persephone beside him, rivers flowing endlessly through his realm. Above him, Olympus shines. Around him, mortals live and die. But beneath it all, his kingdom endures, silent, eternal, inevitable. If Zeus ruled the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades the underworld, then Demeter ruled the living skin of the earth, the soil that feeds, the seed that sprouts, the grain that sustains. She was not the goddess of thunder or storm, but of something far more intimate, the food that mortals placed on their tables each day. Without her, hunger reigned. With her, there was abundance. Demeter's name means simply Earth Mother, and in her we glimpse one of the oldest archetypes of divinity. Long before the Olympians rose to power, ancient peoples worshipped the fertility of the soil, the mystery of planting and reaping, the miracle of life emerging from the ground. Demeter was that mystery given form. To honor her was to honor survival itself. Her emblem was the sheaf of wheat, her presence felt in the golden fields that rippled under the Mediterranean sun. Farmers called upon her before planting, prayed to her when drought threatened, and thanked her at the harvest. Every loaf of bread was hers, every sip of barley drink a libation in her honor. The Greeks did not separate religion from daily life. Demeter was there in every meal, every kitchen, every field. But Demeter was not simply fertility. She was also the goddess of seasons, of the rhythm of growth and decay, joy and grief. This truth was embodied in the myth of her daughter Persephone, who was seized by Hades and carried into the underworld. In her grief, Demeter withdrew her gifts from the earth. Crops withered, trees shed their fruit, animals starved, and mortals faced famine. The world grew cold, barren, lifeless. The gods pleaded with her to relent, but she refused. No one, not even Zeus, could sway her while her daughter remained below. Only when an agreement was struck, that Persephone would spend part of the year in the underworld with Hades and part above with her mother, did Demeter restore fertility to the earth. Thus, the Greeks explained the seasons. When Persephone returned in spring, Demeter rejoiced, and the earth bloomed. When she descended in autumn, Demeter grieved, and the land grew barren. This myth was more than an explanation of weather. It was a metaphor for life itself. All living things are bound by cycles: birth, growth, decay, death, and renewal. Demeter's grief and joy mirrored the natural rhythm that mortals saw in every field and orchard. To eat bread was to partake in this cycle, to taste both death and rebirth. The worship of Demeter was not confined to household altars. She was the central figure of one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world, the Eleusinian mysteries, sacred rites held in the city of Eleusis. For centuries, Greeks from every city-state, rich and poor, men and women, even slaves, were initiated into these secret rituals. Though the exact ceremonies remain hidden, passed down only to initiates, we know that they revolved around the story of Demeter and Persephone, the promise of life after death, and the assurance that the soul, like the seed, does not perish, but transforms. Those who underwent the mysteries swore that life after initiation was sweeter, death less fearful. To walk in Demeter's rites was to carry hope beyond the grave, to see in Persephone's return a symbol of the soul's own renewal. In this way, Demeter was not only the goddess of grain, but of spiritual sustenance, offering meaning as well as food. Demeter was often depicted with a torch, searching the earth for her lost daughter. This image of a mother wandering in grief with a flame in her hand was one of the most poignant in all mythology. It reminded the Greeks that even gods suffer loss, that grief is not weakness, but a force that shapes the world. Through her mourning, the seasons themselves were born. Yet Demeter was not always gentle. Like all the Olympians, she could be fierce when wronged. When King Erysichthon cut down a grove sacred to her, she cursed him with unending hunger. No matter how much he ate, He could not be satisfied. He consumed all his wealth, all his food, and at last consumed himself. This myth carried a warning as clear as it was terrifying. To defy Demeter was to defy the earth itself, to destroy the source of sustenance and invite ruin. Philosophically, Demeter embodied the truth that life depends on balance. Too much grief and the world withers. Too much greed and hunger consumes. Too much neglect and the soil ceases to give. She was the reminder that abundance is not guaranteed, that it must be nurtured, respected, and honored. Every harvest is a gift, not a right. For us, Demeter's story speaks of our dependence on cycles we do not control. We live in a world where technology and abundance make us forget the fragility of food, yet one drought, one famine, one disruption can remind us how delicate survival truly is. Demeter is present not only in myth, but in every field, every meal, every grain of bread that sustains life. And so, Demeter stands among the Olympians, torch in hand, sheaf of wheat at her side, her eyes fixed both on the earth and on the underworld, where her daughter dwells. She is fertility and famine, joy and grief, sustenance and sorrow. She is the cycle of life itself, written in soil and seed, in the rising and falling of seasons, in the endless rhythm of growth and decay. To honor Demeter was to honor the earth. To forget her was to risk famine. To tell her story was to remind ourselves that nothing we eat, nothing we hold, nothing we live by, comes without cost. Every seed dies to give life. Every harvest depends on loss. Every meal is a miracle. And so, when the Greeks broke bread, they remembered Demeter. And in remembering, they remembered among the Olympians, some ruled with thunder, some with storms, some with fire and war, yet one goddess ruled with silence. She had no throne at the center of the hall, no spear or trident, no tales of conquest to echo across the ages. And yet, to the Greeks, her presence was everywhere, constant, essential. She was Hestia, goddess of the hearth. Hestia was the first-born child of Kronos and Rhea, and also the first to be swallowed by her father. When Zeus rose and freed his siblings, Hestia was the last to be brought forth, making her both the oldest and the youngest of the Olympians. This paradox reflected her nature. She was timeless, the first flame kindled and the last flame extinguished. She did not hunger for power or adventure. Instead, she chose a domain that was not spectacular but indispensable, the hearth fire at the center of every home. To the Greeks, the hearth was not merely a fireplace. It was the living heart of the household, the place where food was cooked, warmth was kept, and family gathered. The hearth was the one fire that never went out. From its flames, torches were lit to carry into marriages, sacrifices, and new dwellings. A city, too, had its central hearth, the Prytanean, where an eternal flame was kept burning in Hestia's honor. To extinguish it was to endanger the community itself. In this way, Hestia was present in every home, in every polis, in every sacred space. She had few temples, but she needed none, for every house was her temple, every fire her altar. The Greeks understood her as the quiet axis around which life turned. Zeus might hurl thunderbolts, but without Hestia's flame, no family could eat, no city could endure. Unlike many Olympians, Hestia had no violent myths, no tales of jealousy or vengeance. She refused marriage, even turning down suitors as powerful as Poseidon and Apollo. Instead, she chose virginity and peace. Her power was not in passion or conflict, but in constancy. She was the unmoving center, the flame that gave stability to the chaos of divine drama. Hestia's simplicity often makes her overlooked in myths, yet her very lack of spectacle was her strength. In a pantheon full of strife, Hestia represented the possibility of harmony, where Hera embodied jealousy, Athena strategy, Ares war, Aphrodite desire. Hestia embodied rest. She was not the goddess of action, but of being, a reminder that not all divinity is storm and struggle. Some divinity is quiet, steady, patient. Her role extended beyond the household. When Greeks founded new colonies, they carried a flame from the central hearth of their mother city to light the hearth of the new settlement. In this way, Hestia connected cities across the seas, her fire a thread of continuity between generations and places. She was the symbol of belonging, of origin, of return. Philosophically, Hestia embodies the truth that life requires stillness as much as motion. We think of power as noise, as force, as spectacle, but true power can also be quiet. A single flame, tended faithfully, sustains families, communities, civilizations. Without it, even the mightiest gods would starve. Hestia teaches us that constancy is not weakness, but foundation, that peace is not absence, but presence. For the Greeks, Hestia was also a moral compass. To keep her flame was to honor the bonds of family, hospitality, and community. To neglect her was to neglect one's duties. Her fire was present at marriages, at births, at sacrifices, marking transitions with stability. She reminded mortals that even in times of chaos, there must be a place of warmth and order to return to. In our world too, Hestia speaks. She is the quiet space we create in our homes, the rituals that anchor us, the warmth of meals shared with loved ones. She is the center that gives meaning to motion, the pause that gives rhythm to action. Without such centers, life scatters into chaos. With them, life finds coherence. Among the Olympians, Hestia was often overshadowed, yet perhaps this was fitting. Her nature was not to dominate, but to sustain, not to dazzle, but to endure. She asked for little, gave endlessly, and never ceased to burn. And so, Hestia remains, seated quietly upon Olympus, yet present in every fire, every hearth, every home. She is the goddess who demands no grand temples, yet dwells in every household. She is constancy itself, the first flame, the last flame, the flame that never dies. Among all the strange and wondrous tales of Greek mythology, few are as striking as the birth of Athena. She was not born in the way mortals are born, nor even in the way most gods were. Her origin was violent, sudden, and radiant, a story that combined the mystery of birth with the power of war and wisdom. To the Greeks, Athena's birth explained not only the goddess herself, but the very nature of thought, strategy, and invention. The story begins with Zeus, who had risen as king of the gods after defeating the Titans. Yet even kings are haunted by prophecy. Long before, his grandfather Uranos had cursed his father Kronos, saying that each generation would be overthrown by its own children. Kronos, in fear, swallowed his offspring. Zeus had escaped, and later forced Kronos to disgorge his siblings, fulfilling that prophecy. But the curse did not end there. It lingered, threatening Zeus as well. The warning came in a dream, or in an oracle's words. If Zeus took the goddess Metis as his consort, she would bear him children. The first, a daughter, would be wise and powerful. The second, a son, would be stronger than Zeus himself and destined to overthrow him. Metis, her name meaning cunning thought or wise counsel, was no ordinary goddess. She was one of the primordial deities of wisdom, a titaness who personified intelligence, strategy, and deep insight. To have her as ally was to have foresight. To have her as enemy was to be outwitted. When Zeus heard the prophecy, he was torn. He desired Metis, but he feared her power, and so, in an act of cunning born of fear, he deceived her. Some say he coaxed her to transform into a fly, and then he swallowed her whole. Others say he consumed her in her full form, swallowing her to prevent the birth of the child who might overthrow him. Whatever the version, the act was the same. Zeus took wisdom into himself, believing he had ended the threat. But swallowing wisdom does not destroy it. Inside him, Metis lived on, her mind merging with his, her counsel echoing in his thoughts. And within him, too, the child grew, not destroyed, but transformed, waiting for the moment of birth. It began with a pain. Zeus felt a splitting agony in his head, a thunderous pressure that no god could relieve. He cried out in torment, his groans shaking Olympus. None of the gods knew what to do. Some fled in fear. Others watched in helpless awe. At last, Zeus called for help. In some versions, it was Hephaestus, the smith god, who came with hammer and axe. In others, it was Prometheus or Hermes. Whoever the hand, the act was the same. With a mighty strike, the head of Zeus was cleaved open, and from that wound leapt Athena, fully grown, fully armed, radiant in armor, spear in hand, shield upon her arm. She cried out a battle cry so fierce it shook the earth. Rivers trembled, mountains quaked, the sea foamed with sudden waves. Yet the cry was not only of war, it was of birth, the arrival of thought, strategy, and order into the cosmos. Athena stood not as a fragile child, but as a goddess complete. She was wisdom given form, intellect born in armor, thought ready for battle. Her birth from Zeus's head symbolized the emergence of reason from power, of intelligence from authority, of wisdom from the mind itself. The Greeks saw in her not only a warrior, but a protector of cities, a goddess of crafts, of weaving, of invention. She was strategy as opposed to brute force, discipline as opposed to chaos. If Ares embodied the madness of battle, Athena embodied its clarity. To worship her was to honor the mind as much as the sword. Her symbols reflected this balance. The owl, with its unblinking eyes, represented her watchful wisdom. The olive tree, which she gifted to Athens in her contest with Poseidon, represented peace, prosperity, and endurance. Unlike the trident's saltwater spring or storm, the olive offered steady sustenance, oil, wood, fruit, light. Athena's gifts were not temporary, but lasting, rooted in the soil, nourishing across generations. Athena's virginity, she was called Pallas Athena, the maiden, was not a denial of sexuality, but a declaration of independence. She belonged to no man, no consort, no marriage bond. Her purity was her autonomy, the freedom to embody wisdom unbound by desire. She was untouchable, inviolate, her power rooted in her own being. In Athens, her worship became central. The Parthenon, her great temple, rose upon the Acropolis as a testament to her glory. Inside stood her colossal statue, gleaming with gold and ivory, spear and shield ready. The city bore her name, and its people claimed her protection. To be Athenian was to be under her gaze, guided by her wisdom, inspired by her discipline. Yet Athena was not only a civic goddess, she appeared in countless myths, guiding heroes with her counsel. She aided Perseus in slaying Medusa, giving him shield and strategy. She guided Odysseus on his long journey home, her wisdom shaping his cunning. She stood beside Heracles, Jason, and countless others, her presence a reminder that courage without wisdom is folly. Philosophically, Athena represents the union of mind and might. Her birth from Zeus's head is an allegory of the power of thought, violent in its arrival, yet necessary for order. The Greeks believed that civilization itself depended not only on force, but on intelligence, on the ability to weave, to plan, to create. Athena was that principle made divine. For us, Athena asks, how do we wield power? With rage, like Ares, with thunder, like Zeus, or with strategy, clarity, and wisdom as she does. Her birth reminds us that true strength lies not in domination but in foresight, in understanding, in the ability to see beyond the immediate moment. And so Athena stood, gleaming, spear in hand, shield at her side, eyes clear as the owl's, rooted as the olive tree. She was born not of womb but of mind, not of weakness but of thought. She was wisdom armed, intellect embodied, strategy made flesh. From Zeus's pain came her presence. From his fear came her freedom. From his mind came her might. and in her the Greeks saw themselves, their reason, their invention, their hope that wisdom could triumph over chaos. If Athena was wisdom born from the head of Zeus, then the next great figures of Olympus were born of his passions. From his union with Leto, the goddess of motherhood and gentleness, came the divine twins, Apollo and Artemis. They entered the world not as rivals but as complements, two sides of a single truth: light and shadow, music and silence, civilization and wilderness. Together, they embodied balance. Their birth was not easy. When Leto carried them, the jealous Hera, enraged at Zeus's affair, decreed that no land under the sun would allow her to give birth. Cast adrift, Leto wandered in despair. At last, the floating island of Delos, unanchored to the earth and therefore outside Hera's curse, offered refuge. There, beneath swaying palms and amid the songs of swans, Leto brought forth her children. First came Artemis, who, in some versions, immediately aided in delivering her brother. Thus, from her very first breath, Artemis was the helper of women in childbirth. Then came Apollo, radiant as the rising sun. From the beginning, the twins represented polarity. Artemis, virgin huntress, goddess of wild places, protector of animals and young girls, lived in the forests and mountains. She carried a bow of silver, her arrows swift and silent, her step as light as a deer. She embodied the wilderness untamed, the moon's cold light, the independence that refuses to bow. She loved her freedom fiercely and punished those who sought to violate it. Actaeon, who stumbled upon her bathing, was transformed into a stag and torn apart by his own hounds. Artemis demanded respect for boundaries, the boundaries of nature, of innocence, of autonomy. Apollo, by contrast, embodied order, civilization, and radiant clarity. His bow was of gold, his arrows bringing not only sudden death but also healing, for he was the god of plague and cure alike. He ruled music, poetry, and prophecy. His temple at Delphi, where the Pythia spoke in trance, was the very center of Greek religion, a place where kings and commoners alike sought guidance. His symbol was the lyre, strummed in perfect harmony, expressing the order of the cosmos itself. To worship Apollo was to honor proportion, measure, and clarity. Together, the twins represented the two sides of light. Artemis was the moon, cold, shifting, wild. Apollo was the sun, steady, illuminating, bright. One hunted in silence, the other sang in harmony. One ruled wilderness, the other city. Yet both were archers, their arrows swift and certain, striking from afar. The Greeks saw in them the truth that light is never singular. It comes in forms, waxing and waning, radiant and reflective. The myths of Apollo are vast. He slew the python at Delphi, a monstrous serpent that once guarded the oracle. By killing it, he claimed the site as his own, establishing his prophetic sanctuary. He also pursued love, though often tragically. Daphne fled his advances, transformed into a laurel tree whose leaves became his crown. Hyacinthus, a youth he loved, was struck by a discus and died. From his blood sprang the hyacinth flower. Apollo's loves often ended in sorrow, reflecting the paradox of beauty, radiant yet fleeting, brilliant yet fragile. Artemis too had her tales. She defended maidens, punished arrogance, and demanded respect for the wild. When Agamemnon, leader of the Greeks at Troy, offended her by killing a sacred deer, she stilled the winds, preventing the fleet from sailing. Only the sacrifice of his daughter Iphigenia, whether actual or averted by divine substitution, could appease her. Artemis was not cruel, but uncompromising. The voice of nature reminding mortals that disrespect brings consequences. Philosophically, Apollo and Artemis together embody the dualities of human life. Apollo is reason, art, prophecy, the civilized mind. Artemis is instinct, wildness, independence, the primal force. We too live between these poles, seeking clarity and harmony, yet also craving freedom and silence. The Greeks honored both, knowing that to live fully is to embrace not one, but both sides of light. Their worship spread across Greece and beyond. At Delos, their birthplace, festivals honored them with music, dance, and athletic games. At Delphi, Apollo's oracles shaped decisions of war and peace. In the mountains, Artemis's sanctuaries protected wild animals, and girls dedicated themselves to her before marriage. The twins' presence was woven into the rhythm of life, from the cradle to the grave. For us, Apollo and Artemis remind us of balance. We cannot live only in reason nor only in instinct. We need both. The clarity of Apollo's sun and the mystery of Artemis's moon. Too much reason becomes rigidity. Too much instinct becomes chaos. Together they form a harmony greater than either alone. And so Apollo strums his golden lyre, his voice carrying across mountains, his temple radiating prophecy and order. Artemis moves through the forest, silver arrows flashing, her eyes keen in the moonlight, her step silent as the deer she guards. They are twins, but more than twins. They are complements, mirrors, balance. In their duality, the Greeks saw the structure of the cosmos itself, radiant yet shadowed, ordered yet wild, harmonious yet free. Long before mortals sang of love, long before poets carved beauty into verse, the Greeks told of a goddess born from the very sea itself, Aphrodite. Her birth was unlike any other, as strange as Athena's leap from the head of Zeus, as mysterious as Nyx rising from chaos. She was born not of womb or marriage, but of violence and passion, of severed flesh and the eternal ocean. The story begins with Kronos and Uranus. When Kronos struck down his father and cast his severed genitals into the sea, the waters churned with blood and foam. From that foam, shimmering and radiant, arose a goddess, naked, luminous, crowned by the sea's spray. She stepped onto the shore, and the sand bloomed with flowers beneath her feet. This was Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, and desire. From violence came attraction, from blood came allure. The Greeks saw in her birth a paradox, that beauty itself is born from chaos and strife. The poets disagreed on her origins. Some said she was the daughter of Zeus and Dion, others that she was older than any Olympian, a primal force who emerged at the dawn of time. Whatever her beginning, all agreed that she was irresistible, a presence that bent gods and mortals alike. Her name, Aphrodite, means she who rose from the foam. The Romans would later call her Venus, but the Greeks knew her as the very embodiment of desire. She was not only beauty of form, but the force of attraction that draws beings together. She was the spark that ignites passion, the longing that drives creation, the hunger that moves even the immortal. From the moment she rose from the sea, the gods quarreled over her. Zeus, wary of strife, gave her in marriage to Hephaestus, the smith god, lame and unlovely but skilled beyond measure. It was a strange union, beauty bound to craft, radiance to fire. Yet Aphrodite's heart did not rest with her husband. She loved instead Ares, the war god, her opposite and complement. Together they became a symbol of love's paradox, that beauty seeks passion, that desire often finds its counterpart in conflict. From their union came children who embodied love in all its forms, Phobos and Deimos, fear and terror, Harmonia, harmony, Eros, passion itself. But Aphrodite's loves were not confined to gods. She often walked among mortals, stirring their hearts, changing their fates. She loved Anchises, a Trojan prince, with whom she bore Aeneas, destined to survive Troy's fall, and found a new lineage. She loved Adonis, the beautiful youth whose death by a boar's tusk brought her endless grief, a tale that echoed the cycles of life and loss. In each story, Aphrodite revealed both the sweetness and the sorrow of love, that passion is fleeting, that beauty is fragile, that desire is always touched by death. Her symbols reflected her duality, The dove, soft and gentle, symbolized peace and affection. The rose, delicate yet thorned, symbolized beauty edged with pain. The myrtle spoke of love's enduring power. Yet beneath these soft images lay the truth. Love is not harmless. Love wounds as much as it heals. The Greeks honored Aphrodite in many forms. In Cyprus and Cythera, where she was said to have first stepped onto land, her cults flourished. In Corinth, her worship took on sensual forms, emphasizing her role as goddess of physical desire. In other places, she was revered as Aphrodite Urania, heavenly Aphrodite, representing spiritual love, the bond of souls beyond flesh. She was also Aphrodite Pandemos, of all the people, representing the common desire that unites humankind. Philosophers, too, reflected on her meaning. Plato, in his dialogues, distinguished between these two Aphrodites, the lower who binds bodies and the higher who binds souls. Yet both were necessary. Without physical desire, life would not continue. Without higher love, life would lack meaning. Aphrodite embodied both, the need of flesh and the longing of spirit. To the Greeks, Aphrodite was not a gentle goddess. She was dangerous, irresistible, the power no one could escape. Even Zeus feared her, for she could bend the hearts of gods as easily as those of mortals. Her laughter was said to be sweet, yet behind it lay an inescapable truth. No one is free of longing. To live is to desire, and to desire is to risk pain. For us, Aphrodite asks, what do we love and why? Do we seek harmony or passion, comfort or fire? Do we love with the gentleness of doves or the sharpness of thorns? Her myth reminds us that beauty is fleeting, desire consuming, and love both blessing and curse. To deny it is impossible. To embrace it is to embrace life itself. And so Aphrodite rises eternally from the sea, foam at her feet, flowers blooming in her wake, her gaze irresistible, her presence undeniable. She is love, she is beauty, she is desire. She is the paradox of joy and sorrow, of creation and destruction, of harmony and chaos. She is the goddess who reminds us that to be human is to long, to ache, to be moved beyond reason. From blood and sea foam, from violence and chaos, came the most delicate of powers, the power that binds the world. By now, Olympus was full. From the thunder of Zeus to the quiet flame of Hestia, from the wild hunt of Artemis to the radiant song of Apollo, from Demeter's golden fields to Hades' silent realm below, the gods had taken their places. They were not mere abstractions, not distant forces of nature alone, but a family, a divine order. And like any family, they quarreled, conspired, loved, and fought. To the Greeks, the Olympian order was not perfect harmony, but a fragile balance. The gods did not live free of conflict. Their conflicts mirrored those of mortals. Zeus, though king, was often defied or deceived. Hera schemed, Poseidon brooded, Aphrodite stirred rivalries, Ares raged, and Athena counseled. Their home on Olympus was not a realm of eternal peace, but of eternal drama, a reflection of the human condition written large. Yet this very imperfection made them powerful. If the gods had been flawless, mortals could not relate to them. But the Greeks did not want flawless gods. They wanted gods who embodied the forces that shaped their lives, forces both noble and flawed, beautiful and terrible. In Zeus, they saw authority and passion. In Hera, devotion and jealousy. In Poseidon, strength and unpredictability. In Hades, inevitability. In Demeter, nourishment and grief. In Athena, wisdom. In Apollo and Artemis, balance. In Aphrodite, longing. Each god was both gift and warning. The Olympian order was also a cosmic order. After the Titanomachy, the universe was divided among the three brothers. Zeus ruled the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades the underworld. Earth remained common ground, open to all gods and mortals alike. This division explained the structure of existence itself, binding the cosmos into realms that, though separate, touched each other constantly. Mortals lived under this divine order not as equals, but as participants. The gods walked among them, shaped their fates, and demanded their honor. Temples rose in every city, sacrifices burned upon countless altars. To worship was not optional, it was survival. A city that neglected the gods risked famine, plague, or defeat in war. The Greeks did not separate religion from daily life. The two were woven into a single fabric, yet the relationship was not one-sided. Mortals could resist the gods, defy them, even trick them. Prometheus would steal fire. Odysseus would outwit Poseidon's son. Heracles would challenge Hera's wrath. Mortals were fragile, but they were not powerless. The Olympians demanded respect, but they also granted it to those who showed courage, cunning, or devotion. In this tension lay the essence of Greek religion. Not blind submission, but negotiation with forces larger than oneself. The gods themselves were bound too, not only by rivalry but by fate. Over all the Olympians loomed the Moirai, the fates, who spun, measured, and cut the thread of life. Even Zeus, with his thunderbolts, could not escape their decrees. This truth was humbling. The Greeks believed that no matter how powerful, no being was free of destiny. Order was never absolute, always fragile, always under the shadow of time. Philosophically, the Olympian order reveals how the Greeks saw their world. Life was not governed by a single principle, but by many, often at odds. Justice and passion, wisdom and desire, fertility and famine, storm and calm, love and death, each pulled against the other. Yet together they created a balance, a cosmos that was neither chaos nor perfection, but something in between. To live was to navigate this tension, to honor each force without expecting harmony. This view was profoundly human. Unlike later traditions that demanded perfection from gods, the Greeks accepted their deities as mirrors of themselves. The Olympians quarreled as mortals quarreled, loved as mortals loved, betrayed as mortals betrayed. Their immortality did not make them alien, but amplified the patterns of human life until they filled the heavens. To tell their stories was to tell our own, dressed in lightning and fire. For us, the Olympian order remains compelling because it speaks to a timeless truth. Life is not unity, but multiplicity. We do not live under one force, but under many, pulling us in different directions. We long for love, yet fear its pain. We seek wisdom, yet fall to desire. We strive for justice, yet break promises. The Greeks did not deny this complexity. They celebrated it, giving each aspect a name, a story, a god. And so Olympus stood, a shining mountain above the clouds, its halls filled with laughter, rage, passion, and prophecy. From there the gods watched the world, their hands in every storm and harvest, every war and wedding. Mortals looked up and prayed, and the gods looked down and remembered, or forgot. The Titanomachy had established their reign, but it was the Olympian order, the interplay of these divine personalities, that gave meaning to their world. Each god had a place, each force had a voice. Together they formed not perfection but story, and story, the Greeks knew, is the thread that binds chaos into meaning. Thus ends this chapter of our journey, the age of the Olympians fully formed. Their thrones are set, their realms defined, their myths beginning to unfold. From here will come endless tales of heroes and monsters, of love and betrayal, of wisdom and folly. But the foundation is here, a divine family, flawed and mighty, whose presence shaped every breath of mortal life. And so Olympus gleams above us, eternal yet trembling, radiant yet shadowed. The gods are seated, the order established. The true drama of mythology now begins. See you in the next chapter soon. Good night.